You've been putting in the hours, 50-hour weeks, maybe 60. You take on every project that lands in your inbox. You answer Slack messages at 11 at night because that's what a committed person does. And you keep waiting for the moment when all that effort finally tips into real financial freedom. The kind where you're not quietly doing the math in your head before every major purchase. But here's the thing, nobody in the hustle culture space wants to say out loud, working harder might actually be the exact reason your financial freedom keeps slipping out of reach. The Federal Reserve's 2022 survey of consumer finances found that the top 10% of American households control 69% of all U.S. wealth. And I promise you, they are not the ones logging the most hours. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to see exactly where your effort is leaking and what to put in its place. Let's start with the data, because the data is genuinely unsettling. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2023 American Time Use Survey, full-time workers in the U.S. average around 44.5 hours per week. That's more than comparable workers in Germany, France, the United Kingdom, or Japan. We work more. We grind more. And yet the Federal Reserve's same 2022 report puts the median American household net worth at $192,700. That sounds reasonable until you realize the top 10%'s median net worth sits somewhere north of $1.9 million. That's a 10-to-1 gap. And the people on top are not working 10 times harder. They're doing something categorically different. And most people never figure out what it is because they're too occupied being occupied. Here's where the math actually collapses. Research from economist John Pencavel at Stanford, published as an IZA discussion paper in 2014, tracked the relationship between hours worked and measurable output across multiple work settings. What he found was a consistent productivity cliff. Above about 50 hours per week, output per hour falls sharply enough that a 60-hour week produces roughly the same real results as a 45-hour one. You're not getting 60 hours of productive work done. You're getting 45 hours of real output plus 15 hours of fatigued, distracted motion that feels like effort but doesn't produce much that matters. The hours are real, the output less so. And here's my honest take on why this persists. I think we mistake visible activity for real progress because activity is something you can feel and count. You can see yourself typing, you can count the meetings you attended, you can feel the exhaustion at the end of the day, and fatigue has always been our cultural shorthand for giving everything you had. The Protestant work ethic runs deep in American culture, the idea that diligence is its own virtue, that sweat is the currency of success. I grew up wired with that. But at some point I had to sit with an uncomfortable question. If raw effort were the driver of financial security, why do the people I know who work the hardest, shift workers, people juggling 2 jobs, parents running on 4 hours of sleep, consistently have the least financial cushion? And why does the person who protects their Tuesday mornings for focused work seem to be compounding faster? The answer has almost nothing to do with effort quantity and almost everything to do with effort quality. That distinction is the whole game. Which brings us to the psychology piece, because this is where it gets really personal. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, published in 2018, argues that durable behavior change only happens when you shift your identity, not just your habits. What you do flows from who you believe you are. And here's the painful flip side that I don't think gets said enough. The wrong identity can trap you just as powerfully as the right one can free you. If your deepest self-concept is, I am a hard worker, and for a lot of people reading this, that is a core piece of how you see yourself, then you will keep optimizing for effort, because effort is what validates that identity. You will say yes to more projects. You will fill every open slot in your calendar. You will measure yourself by busyness rather than by what you're actually building. And you will feel genuine guilt whenever you're not grinding, even when the grinding is producing nothing directional. Organizational behavior researchers have identified a personality pattern that describes this almost perfectly. They call it the anxious overachiever, someone high-performing, highly capable, deeply committed to their work, but driven less by a clear vision of where they're going and more by a fear of being seen as someone who doesn't try hard enough. They tend to be first in, last out. They volunteer for everything. They have a near-compulsive pull toward saying yes, because saying no feels like evidence that they're slacking. The work is real, the direction, often scattered. Take Priya, a 33-year-old data analyst who a former colleague told me about. She worked in Atlanta, 5 years into her role, excellent performance reviews, genuinely taking on more than anyone else on her team. She hadn't gotten a meaningful raise in 2 years. When she finally blocked off 2 hours to audit where her time was actually going, she found that roughly 75% of her week was consumed by tasks she could handle on autopilot. Status reports, data pulls, formatting dashboards for meetings she wasn't decision-making in. The remaining 25% was the work she'd been hired for, and that actually differentiated her. She told my contact, "I kept saying yes to everything because I was afraid that if I said no, they'd realize they didn't need me." Here's the brutal irony. Her availability made her essential for all the wrong things. Her manager loved having her. No one was fighting to promote her. Now let's add the research that ties this together, because there's a widely repeated idea that I want to address directly. The 10,000-hour rule. You've heard it. Malcolm Gladwell popularized the notion in Outliers in 2008. Put in 10,000 hours and you'll master anything. It galvanized people, and the message wasn't entirely wrong, but it was significantly incomplete. Anders Ericsson, the psychologist whose research Gladwell was drawing from, spent years correcting the record. Ericsson's own book, Peak Secrets from the New Science of Expertise, published in 2016 with Robert Poole, makes the distinction explicit. It's not 10,000 hours of practice that generates expertise. It's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, meaning practice that targets your current weakest edges, involves immediate and specific feedback, and requires mental engagement. Most people almost never practice this way. What they actually do is what Ericsson calls naive practice, repeating what they already know how to do, which keeps them comfortable but doesn't build much that's new. Cal Newport sharpens this into a financially urgent point in Deep Work, published in 2016. He identifies 2 modes of professional effort: deep work, cognitively demanding, distraction-free effort that pushes your capabilities forward, and shallow work, replicable, logistical tasks that don't require intense focus and don't create meaningful differentiation. His argument is that the capacity for deep work is simultaneously becoming rarer and more valuable. According to Gallup's 2023 State of the Global Workplace report, roughly 77% of workers globally are either not engaged or actively disengaged at work. That's not laziness. Most of these people are busy. They're just busy with shallow, reactive, unfocused activity. The knowledge economy increasingly rewards people who can do the thing most workers never make time for: go deep. Stick around for one more minute, because the next piece is the one that nobody frames as a financial issue, but it absolutely is. If this is landing for you, drop a comment below and tell me what percentage of your work week you think is genuinely deep, focused, outcome-moving work. Be honest with yourself, and subscribe if you want the follow-up on this. We're going to build on it. Real talk. The most expensive professional habit the high achiever crowd almost never names as a financial problem is compulsive agreeableness. Not a credit card balance, not a bad investment. Saying yes to everything and everyone at work automatically before you've had a moment to think. Here's the mechanism. Someone asks you to take on a project. Before they've even finished the sentence, you've said yes, because you want to be seen as a team player, because you're worried about what signals a no sends, because your sense of worth in the room has always been tied to your usefulness. So you take the project and the next one, and you become the person everyone counts on for everything, which feels genuinely good, right up until you realize you've built a role where your value is your availability, not your expertise. And availability, unlike expertise, does not compound. It does not command a premium. It does not give you leverage in a salary conversation or a negotiation with a client. The research on this is fairly stark. A well-known study by Timothy Judge and colleagues, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 2012, examined the relationship between agreeableness and income across thousands of workers and found a consistent and meaningful inverse relationship. More agreeable workers earned significantly less than their less agreeable counterparts. even controlling for education, experience, and role type. The researchers called the finding a nice guy penalty. The people who couldn't say no were also, on average, making less, not because they weren't working hard, but because their hard work was perpetually directed by everyone else's priorities. Think about Marcus, a 36-year-old product coordinator I heard about through a mutual contact in Phoenix. He spent 3 years being the most responsive, most collaborative person on his cross-functional team. First to respond in Slack, first to volunteer for the cross-departmental working group. When his year-end review came around, his manager told him he was a joy to work with and gave him a 3% raise. Marcus asked about a path to a senior role. His manager's response, essentially, "We need you exactly where you are," which translated in plain English to, "Your availability makes you too valuable to promote." Marcus's generosity had accidentally made him indispensable to the one role he was trying to move out of. He told my contact, "I thought being a team player was how you moved up. Nobody told me it was also how you got stuck." The fix isn't becoming difficult or cold. It's something much more targeted. Behavioral researchers describe it as an intentional delay. Before committing to any significant request, you create a brief, deliberate pause. Not a hard no, not a soft maybe, just a structure. Let me check where this sits relative to what I'm focused on this week. I'll get back to you by end of day. That pause does two things. It breaks the automatic yes reflex that's running on people-pleasing autopilot, and it subtly signals that your time has structure and intentionality, which, counterintuitively, increases how much people value it. Boundaryless availability doesn't generate respect. It generates more requests. Honestly, I think strategic saying no is one of the highest ROI financial moves available to a professional in their 30s. Not because it makes you look powerful, but because it creates the time and mental space for deliberate practice in the one area that will actually move your income. You cannot go deep on the skill that 10x's your market value while you're managing 60% of your week in shallow reactive mode. Every yes to the wrong thing is a no to the right one. So let's talk about what going deep actually produces, because this is where the financial math starts to work in your favor instead of against you. The Pareto principle, the 80/20 rule, applies to skill acquisition in a way that most people underestimate. In almost every professional domain, approximately 80% of your practical output and market value comes from a concentrated cluster of 20% of your skill set, which means that the difference between being broadly good at many things and being genuinely exceptional at one specific thing is not a marginal improvement. It is a category shift. And category shifts are where compensation premiums live. A financial analyst who can do a bit of everything earns one salary range. A financial analyst who becomes the recognized expert in one specific industry vertical, who understands the nuance, the players, the risks, the patterns better than anyone else accessible at their price point, has options the generalist simply doesn't have. The same logic applies across marketing, engineering, operations, consulting, healthcare, and most other professional fields. The generalist is replaceable. The expert in something specific is, to some degree, the market. The path to that position is narrower than most people are willing to commit to. Pick one area, not two, not three. One thing where you want to go from capable to undeniable. And then apply what Ericsson's deliberate practice framework demands. Work at the outer edge of your current ability, seek specific feedback on what isn't working, and adjust deliberately. Do that for a real stretch of time, at minimum 12 to 18 months of focused, protected effort. Think about Derek, a marketing manager in Nashville I heard about through a contact in his former industry. Mid-30s, talented, working hard in exactly the scattered way we've been describing, spread across brand, campaign management, content strategy, analytics, and half a dozen other things. He made a decision to stop volunteering for half of what he'd been saying yes to, and to redirect that recaptured time toward one specific thing: video content performance. Not content broadly, video performance metrics specifically. He built a system for testing, tracking, and understanding what drove results in that one format. About 14 months in, he had a demonstrable track record that was genuinely hard to replicate. He told my contact, I stopped trying to be good at everything and spent 90 days obsessing over one number, then the next 90 days on the next one. He didn't work more hours, he worked fewer, but the output was now clearly attributable and clearly his, which is the only thing that actually gives you leverage. James Clear's framing for the identity shift that makes this sustainable, instead of "I am someone who works hard," you're cultivating the belief that I am someone who delivers specific, measurable outcomes. That identity doesn't produce guilt when you say no to shallow work. It produces clarity. Every decision gets filtered through a simple question. Does this build toward the outcome I am becoming known for, or does it dilute it? Here's the piece that genuinely surprised me when I thought through this fully. We talk a lot about skills and habits and mindset, and all of that matters. But behavioral science is increasingly clear that one of the most powerful variables in whether someone actually breaks through their income ceiling is not their work ethic and not even their skill development alone. It's their environment, specifically the people who surround them daily. The income levels their immediate circle considers normal. The career trajectories their closest relationships treat as achievable. Psychological research on social anchoring shows that our sense of what's financially realistic is not derived primarily from data. It's derived from what we observe in the people around us. If every person in your daily orbit is operating within a certain income band, working a certain type of job, and carrying a certain unconscious relationship with what they deserve financially, that becomes your reference point for normal. Not because you're unambitious, but because human beings are deeply social animals who calibrate against their environment constantly and largely without noticing. The financially uncomfortable version of this shows up as the "you've changed" moment. You know the one. You start protecting your time more deliberately. You start developing depth in a specific area. Your income starts moving, and someone close to you, maybe someone you love, says it. You've changed. Not with admiration, with something that sounds more like unease or accusation. And what that moment actually is underneath the surface is a social calibration signal. The unconscious message is, you are moving outside our shared reference frame for what people like us do, and that creates friction for me. That friction is real, and it often gets communicated in ways that feel like concern for you, but function as gravity on your trajectory. I'm not saying, cut the people you love out of your life. That is not the point. The point is recognizing that income ceilings are often social before they are financial. The ceiling isn't just the skills you haven't built yet, it's also what the people around you believe is realistically achievable for someone in your position. And shifting that requires either changing who you're spending time with or adding relationships where the reference frame is different. Adding, not subtracting. The practical version of this is more accessible than it sounds. You don't have to blow up your relationships or move cities. You have to add one community where the baseline for what's possible is higher than your current one. A professional group, a mastermind, a mentorship relationship with someone operating at the level you're moving toward. Not because those people are better than the people already in your life, but because repeated exposure to different reference frames is how your brain updates its unconscious definition of normal. That update is what makes ambition feel realistic rather than arrogant. Here's where I'll leave you. Financial freedom isn't waiting on the other side of more hours or more projects or more hustle. It's on the other side of more precision, deliberate practice in one specific direction, protected by intentional decisions about where your time goes, supported by an environment where that direction is treated as possible. The Federal Reserve data doesn't show that the wealthiest Americans logged the most hours. It shows they built expertise, leverage, and social context that made their hours progressively worth more. That's the shift, not from lazy to driven, from scattered to precise. In the next video, I'm going to walk through exactly how to identify which one's skill is worth going deep on, given where you actually are right now, not where you wish you were, because that's the specific step where most people get stuck. And the answer is more concrete and faster to figure out than you might expect. If this gave you something to think about, subscribe and I'll see you there. And drop a comment with the honest answer to this. What is the one area at work that if you went truly deep on it for the next year, would actually change your income trajectory. I read every one of those. See you in the next one.